to myself. So there's literally no point being nervous and angsty when I'm speaking to myself, is there? Let me just set up my camera here properly. Okay, so I wanted to do this live because the last week has been so historic, and the events of the last week have been earth-shaking. And it's really, really scary because now we have something like a genocide is unfolding in Gaza. And when I started doing this blogging, political, public work, I guess I found my niche in it all was kind of helping to explain to the less educated, honest viewer who wants to know what's happening in this world. And so that's what this video is going to attempt to do. I'm going to try to give a brief explanation of the history of the Palestine-Israel conflict. Next, I'm going to move on to what's happening now, the events of this week and what's happened. And then thirdly, I want to talk about the prospects of the allies of the resistance actually helping. And I have a good post I found on Instagram of the statements from all the different allies that have promised to help Palestine. And I want to go through them one by one with you guys. And I want to see what do we think, because tomorrow is the day that Hamas asked for all their allies to help in the resistance. And we will see, because if they don't help, the poor Palestinians are in a tough spot. So let me have this sip. Okay, so I didn't do much prep. I was busy with work today. I just want to get this camera a bit further away. I don't think you need so much of my face. Okay, yeah. Okay, so the way I organized to do this without any much prep or much statistics in front of me, I said I'd just give 3 different statements and just freestyle it off of that. So statement number 1, this is not a religious conflict, okay? I'll say it again. The Arab-Israeli conflict is not religious in nature. It is not over versions of God or their holy books or holy scriptures or anything like that this conflict can be explained by. And that's just an introductory point to describe the history. Why did I choose this point? Well, because I'm Irish, and it wasn't so long ago we had a quite nasty conflict ourselves in the north of this country, known as the Troubles. And a way that a lot of the British imperialist media would minimize this conflict, they'd say, oh, it's a sectarian conflict. It's just poor religious fanatics attacking one another back and forth. But that wasn't the case at all. Yes, it was a conflict mainly between Catholic Irish communities and Protestant British communities, but they weren't arguing over whether Mother Mary was a virgin or issues of scripture or anything like this. No, the conflict of the Troubles was essentially a classic native versus settler colonial conflict, where there's a native people doing their thing on their own land where they've been since prehistory. And then a settler comes in, usually with an empire behind him, and he wants to replace the population, usually through means of genocide, whether it's starvation or outright massacres. And that is the exact same situation today in Palestine. So you have basically ethnic cleansing, replacement. You had the native people, the Palestinians. And let's get into the history a little bit, okay? So 1900, neither of these countries exist. That whole area is controlled by the Ottoman Empire. I don't have statistics in front of me, but I've seen these many times. So I believe around the year 1900, there was less than 5,000 Jews in the area we can call today Palestine. Why? Because it's a very holy place in the Torah. It's the start, isn't it? Jerusalem and all these places is the center of all the religious worlds. But there was about a few thousand Jews scattered amongst that land as a very clear minority against Arabs. And majority of the Arabs there were Muslims. Some of them are Christian too. But that's 1900, okay? During World War I, the Ottoman Empire gets crushed and the Middle East comes under the partition of French and British control. So the French and the British get their hands on it, and this is where they plant the seed of Israel. So this, I believe it was the Balfour Declaration in 1917, where the British first promised to create a home nation for the Jews in the Middle East. So this is the Balfour Declaration 1917. Okay, so this is planted the first seed of the idea of a state of Israel where there is no basis for it. But the only basis they got for it was that it's not in Europe. I think the initial motivations of the British elites for this was simple anti-Semitism. They didn't want Jewish people in Europe. So they got this great idea. Oh, look, the Middle East they're just weak, undefended people there. We have the territory now. Why don't we put the Jews there, get them out of our way? Oh, the Palestinians have a problem? We don't care. We're in charge. So that was the initial plan. And then the numbers started to grow in this Zionist project. So I wish I had the statistics up in front of me, but one Google search there, any of you guys will get them. So by 1917, it was probably around 10,000. And the British, between the two wars, were trying to play a balancing act between the Arabs and between the between the Israelis or the Jewish. There was no Israeli at that time. And they kind of deferred it, while always increasing the numbers of Jewish people. Hello, Redshanks. How are you? Any questions, Redshanks? I'll just keep note of them and I'll answer them when I come back around, okay? I'll try to get a bit of a flow here. I'm just giving a brief history of what I know of the Arab-Israeli conflict. Anything you can add, please do. But yeah, so 1917, the British first introduced the idea of making a home nation for the Jews in the Middle East. I believe by 1945, they had facilitated Jewish immigration so much that they were already by then around 30% of the population. And now we all know about World War II, the Holocaust, and the results of World War II. So World War II is finished and 6 million Jews were killed, 6 million out of 12 million, I believe, which suggests that there was 6 million Jews displaced in Europe after World War II. And they started facilitating more immigration to Palestine, and the numbers started to grow. And by this time, the British had lost their world standing. So we all know the British suffered horrible losses in World War II. They tried to paint it as a victory, but it was anything but a victory. They got chased out of Norway, they fled France, they stayed in London and got bombed out for nearly the whole duration of the war. And they had to wait for America to come and take Western Europe for themselves. So Britain entered World War II as a superpower and left World War II as a proxy. And while the British elite's motivations for getting the Jews into Palestine might have been mere anti-Semitism before World War II, the Americans who controlled British foreign policy after World War II, their intention, I think beyond the getting Jews out of Europe, that didn't bother them at all, was a very clear, obvious objective to have a client state right in the middle of the Arab world that gets its funding from America, that gets its political legitimacy from America, and that is totally America's yes man, right in the middle of the Levant, right in the middle where all these Arab nations meet, right there in the Levant, right in the middle of them, this militaristic brainchild of the West, there to impede progress and bring destruction. And that's what we're seeing up until this present day. So I just took a few notes, guys, of the key times. So 1947, the UN agrees to partition Israel between Muslims and Jewish. 1948, the Israelis declare independence from the British. This ignites a war with some Arab neighbors. Egypt was definitely one. I'm not sure who else. The Israelis win this war and they consolidate their gains. And then the next war is in 1967, which is the Six-Day War between Israel, Egypt, and some other Arab neighbors again. And Israel won this war. And you might wonder, racists will say, oh, the Arabs just couldn't get it together or whatever like that. But it's nothing to do with race at all, guys. You have to remember, the 20, 30 years after World War II, Israel was the West, was the full power of the American empire, the latest weapons, all the money. Whereas Egypt, Syria, Iraq, these countries were the real third world that had really just gotten their sovereignty back, or gotten half their sovereignty back in some cases. And for example, in the 1967 conflict, they just weren't strong enough. They had the unity back then, the Arab world, but unfortunately they weren't strong enough to defeat Israel. So in 1967, the Six-Day War happens and Israel grows even more. So it takes the Golan Heights off Syria, which it legally holds to this day, which every UN statement tells them to give it back, but they don't. And they also took the Sinai region of Egypt. And they gave that back later on, I believe, in the 1980s. And thank you, geographer. Can you explain what is Hamas? And is it the same as Palestine, or is it a separate organization? Okay, I'll just finish this point on the history, then I'll come on to your question, okay? So in 1973, war breaks out again. This one's more of a stalemate. The Arabs had got more Soviet help and they kind of caught up. At this stage, remember the Nasser was leading kind of a pan-Arab project in Egypt. He united Egypt and Syria, so they were slightly stronger by then. But then there was all types of bad processes in those countries. They got rid of Nasser. They came back in Egypt. They came back under the thumb of the West. So the Israelis continue with their project, with their plan for their promised land, with a Jewish state for a Jewish people. And this inevitably leads to more settlements in Muslim areas. They're constantly expanding. And then in 1987, you get the first Intifada, which is basically a national uprising of the Palestinians. This is the first one in 1987, and this is when Yasser Arafat and the PLO, the Palestine Liberation Organization, who later became Fatah, I believe, who were of a much more socialist, secular nature than Hamas today. They were leading the fighting back then. They got some good results. Israel couldn't get rid of them, which led to the Oslo Accords, which created mutual recognition. Prior to that, the Israelis did not recognize any Palestinian authority. After the Oslo Accords of 1993, the Israelis recognized the Palestinian Authority, that's what it's called, that would have jurisdiction over the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. And I looked at Gaza Strip, guys. It's about 20 kilometers and it looks about 5 kilometers wide. You can check yourselves, but it's a tiny piece of land for an insane amount of people. And they continued with their settlements, and basically they broke the Oslo Accords. I'm not sure of the ins and outs, but they broke the Oslo Accords by continuing the settlements, by always infringing upon Palestinian land. And you guys can see a map of Israel 1948 to 2023. If anybody of you Googles this, you'll see the very gradual dispossession of the Palestinians, how it was all Muslim land, a little bit less. Then you'll see the Oslo Accords, which gave them the full West Bank. Then you can see how they started chipping in on that and how they started reducing Gaza. So now you can see on a map just the paltry parts that are left to the Palestinians to govern themselves, and how the whole majority of that vast territory is a Jewish state for Jewish people, with Arab Israelis who are treated like second-class citizens. So this is very rushed. This is all out of my head, but I'll answer your question now, geographer. So can you explain what is Hamas, and is it the same as Palestine, or is it a separate organization? No, it's not. It's not the same as Palestine. So it's a political party, really, is the easiest way to understand it. Except in the Middle East, political parties are often armies as well. So Hezbollah is another one. They're actually a political party. They're in a coalition government with other parties in Lebanon, but they also have an armed wing. So that is the same with Hamas. So Hamas was set up around the time of the first Intifada, 1987. So obviously the Palestinian masses were getting a little bit fed up with Arafat and the PLO's approach. And so 1987, Hamas gets set up. Hamas is a Sunni organization. And dare I say, I believe it's a Salafist organization, which means that it is quite an old school, strict fundamentalist take on Islam. And it very much is a Sunni organization. It promotes Sunni values. Not that I know the difference between Sunni and Sharia, I can't lie. So what's the difference between Hamas and Palestine? So Palestine should be a country, but it's really just a territory at the moment. Palestine, we could call the Palestinians are a nation. Anyone that falls under what we now today call Israel, any Muslims from here before 1948 would have been called Palestinians. So Palestine is a territory. Hamas is one of the ruling forces, ruling parties. So at the moment, Hamas rules Gaza and some parts of the West Bank, but also Fatah, who I believe are the successors of the PLO, who are a bit more secular in nature. And they also administer some parts of the West Bank. And Mahmoud Abbas, the president of the Palestinian Authority, he represents Fatah, not Hamas. Now, I remember very young, I can't remember where I read it, but I remember very young reading in a book that the Mossad, the Israeli intelligence services, were involved in promoting Hamas to become dominant in the PLO over the, dominant in Palestine over the PLO. Why would they want to do this? Because for the international TV screens, which is such a big factor in modern war, the Israelis preferred to have a fundamentalist opponent in Hamas, so they can present to the world that this is us fighting secularists fighting against these ghastly religious fundamentalists. So that's what I read. I can't remember where, and this is something now this conflict wants to get me reading on again. But some people say that Hamas was encouraged by Israel at the get-go. I wouldn't go as far to say as in it was made by Israel or created by Israel, because obviously any people that had suffered as much as the Palestinians, the displacements, the massacres, the being forced into the open-air prison of Gaza, of course that creates a kind of extremity in the political thought in the people. And of course they needed resistance leaders. So I think Hamas would have came about organically, but it could have been encouraged by the Mossad, and it would make good sense for them to do that. So anyway, fast forward to more recent times. When I was a young man in my teens or learning of this world, and one of the main conflicts that helped explain this world to me was the Syrian conflict and the proxy nature of it and the information war they used against Assad and all the fake news and all the tactics. That's what kind of introduced this new rotten Third World War to me. But one thing that always put me off Hamas is that they joined the calls for the proxy war against Bashar. Now, I'll have to make another video sometime for Syria, but anyone that follows my Instagram will know that I believe that Syria came under attack in 2011 by an international coalition that wanted regime change, to balkanize that country to get the resource for the West themselves. And the way the West did this was just through bullshit media narrative. They funded extremists. They portrayed the extremists as innocent protesters. The innocent protesters / Wahhabi jihadists started assassinating policemen, government workers, etc. The government, Bashar al-Assad's government, tries to react, to protect the state, to protect the people. And the West called this a horrible crackdown on human rights. Why do I smell smoke in my room? Sorry, one sec. One sec, guys. I think there might be something burning, guys. Excuse me, moi. Ireland's goofiest fucking streamer / YouTube guy. Sorry, I thought I smelled burning, but it must be outside because it's Halloween and Irish kids love bonfires around this time of year. Sorry, so what I was saying is I didn't trust Hamas because they joined the regime change operation in Syria in 2011, and I believe they actually even could have went to Syria to fight against Assad. When I say Assad, I mean the legitimate government of Syria, the Syrian Arab Republic, as represented by their elected leader, Bashar al-Assad. So Hamas supported, Hamas supported that regime change operation. I believe they sent fighters, which would have been evidence to me that they are Western puppets. And I never gave much faith to them since then. Up until October 2022 this year, when I would have seen on maybe Al Jazeera or Al Mayadeen that, oh my God, this camera keeps falling down. Sorry, guys. Sorry, up until October 2022, I saw that Hamas began to restore their ties with Syria, and they sent a delegation to Damascus to meet Assad, and they reopened their relations with Syria. And I guess this would have shown, this would have been because they needed Iran's help. And Iran and Syria and the Houthis are inseparable, as well as Hezbollah. They're known as the axis of resistance. So obviously Hamas in 2011 were hoping to kind of win concessions for Palestine by going with the US plan for the region. By 2022, they switched teams. They began to improve their relations with the axis of resistance. Now, what happened in the meantime for them to do that? A lot happened, of course. There was somewhat of a war in 2014, wasn't there? the Israelis bombarded Gaza pretty hard. I don't have the facts in front of me. I do know that Trump's recognition of Jerusalem as the capital of Israel would have been a big no-no for anyone in the Hamas circle still hoping at least to get concessions from the West. After Trump recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital, they should have, all of them, I guess, knew by then there's nothing to be won by the West. The West is the whole problem. The West created their problem. It puts Israel there and it keeps Israel there. Then also, guys, in the last 3 years, the provocations on Israel's behalf have been proliferating. So I don't know where, guys, I don't have the facts in front of me again, but we kept hearing about more and more settlements, like just a constant stream of news and more settlements. Anyone that follows this media has all seen the horrible footage of Orthodox Jews coming up with a horrible, arrogant attitude, telling Palestinian women to get out of their house. This is my house now. And this just has become so normalized, happening since 1948. But I think it was proliferating in the last few years. And I think the biggest provocation the Israelis done in the last 2 years was they started messing with the Al-Aqsa Mosque. I believe that's the most holy mosque in Jerusalem for the Muslims, which is one of the most holy cities for them. And the Palestinians want Jerusalem to be their capital as well. They see it as their capital. So not only did Trump recognize Jerusalem as the Israeli capital, which was totally provocative, they also started infringing on the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Who can remember that horrible footage from a few months ago of the funeral in the Al-Aqsa Mosque? And we see the Palestinians holding the coffin, and we see the horrible Israeli police with batons beating up the people at a funeral, holding up a coffin, and they dropped the coffin with the corpse inside. So that was really, I can't see any reason Israel wanted to do that other than provoke an offensive like Hamas did last Saturday. Because my next point, which I'll finish up with, I'll answer some questions now, and then I'll finish up on my last point, is that Israel wants genocide. And that is their plan here. Success for Israel is cleansing of that entire region, is a Jewish state for Jewish people, and they will not stop within Palestine. Do you understand? So if they cleanse Gaza, which is a horrible thought to say with 2 million people there, and they're asking for it, they've been asking Egypt for it for a long time now. Will you take the Gazans into Sinai? Will you take them? Will you take them? The Egyptians would be very silly to do that because they're not stopping there. Do you understand? These are Zionists. They believe they are the chosen race. This is in their scripture. Do you understand? I've always had great respect for Islam because it does not say that other worshippers are incorrect. So I always have great respect for Islam for that. Christianity, Hinduism, equal respect for, any religious world culture I have respect for. But Judaism is the one that not only are the rest of them all wrong, but other ethnic people can't even convert to Judaism. So I can convert to Protestantism, I can convert to Islam, I can convert to Buddhism, but Judaism is the one that's ethno-exclusive. So that just goes to show you that they're extremists, the Zionist extremists, have a crazy mindset of being a chosen people, and they are not going to stop in Palestine because they haven't stopped. And it was created not to stop. It was created to be a military machine on behalf of the West because extremists, fundamentalists make good proxies. And I guess I feel like I repeat myself a bit because whether it's Ukraine, whether it's Northern Ireland, whether it's Palestine, it's the same story again and again. They fund the extremists, they manipulate the media, and they serve Western interests. And that's what's happening at the moment. And so I'm just going to look at some of your questions now, guys. Sorry. Geographer, I hope I helped you at all there. Hamas is a political party. It governs Gaza and some of West Bank is with Fatah. They're the two political parties that run. They both have armed wings. But Palestine is the nation that they govern. Do you understand? Stefan, thank you for coming, my man. Valafam. Let's go, Serbia. Do you think that Palestinians have any chance? So, yeah, I was going to get onto that in my next point, but I'll just get onto it now. Do I think Palestinians have any chance? So, population-wise, I believe there's about 7 million Israelis versus about 5 million Palestinians. So that doesn't seem too bad, but the problem is they have the Palestinians cut in two. So they have 2.3 million cut off in this tiny Gaza Strip area. So If you had asked me last Friday, do I think Hamas or the wider Palestinian resistance could have any chance of successes against Israel, I would have said, no, are you crazy? They're isolated. They can't get aid into Gaza. They've been blockaded for, I think, 20 years now. They don't have political unity among themselves. I would have said, no way. But then Saturday happened, guys. And Saturday caught me by the balls, caught everybody by surprise, guys. Because Saturday was extremely successful. Do you understand? Israel has that tiny Gaza area. They have all the surveillance, all the high technology, all the anti-aircraft systems, all their cameras. That people would have thought that was the most secure border in the world. But it turned out last Saturday morning to be anything but the most secure border in the world. And we saw Hamas's amazing innovation and ingenuity with the hangar glides and all this. So they had great success. So sorry, Stefan, I'm going to get to you. I'm just going to talk about the last week and then I'll talk about the wider chances of success after that. So I guess the first big news on Saturday, Hamas is attacking and they're making progress, which nobody could believe, and that they were in a lot of settlements in the Gaza envelope on the Israeli side, and nobody believed they could take the battle that far. And then we started getting news about this festival. So I want to be careful here. I don't want to sound insensitive, guys, but that festival was not a black and white inhuman massacre. It doesn't seem to be. We would have had footage of that by now. You know, there was apparently 3,000 people at that festival. If it really was showdown in a field where all of them got shot, would there not be a glimpse of footage of a man shooting them all down? Not one came out. The only footage of gunfire that anybody saw that I've seen so far, and I've been looking for it, had been a bunch of festival goers in a field with 2 or 3 armed policemen among them shooting at the guys, and people ducking, diving. But there was at least 2 or 3 armed policemen amongst the festival goers that were hiding from the bullets. So what happened? So it was reported that at least 260 corpses were found. The only picture we were shown was one room, which I think could have been 50 corpses max. And we did see some of the kidnappings, and nobody knows how much got kidnapped or how much are alive, because now, ever since then, Israel has been flattening Gaza. These people are obviously, they have to be kept in buildings. They're obviously being killed with the rest of the Palestinians. And Israel doesn't care. And that's like, Israel does not care about those hostages. It could have been 500 hostages. It could have been 1,000 hostages. And it was probably a good idea from Hamas, because Israel has shown they do not care for Palestinians. They do not care for war law, for the law on war, for human rights, for any of these concerns. Hamas probably thought, if we get 500, 1,000 of their youth, will they negotiate with us then? Will they see us as human then? Will they do it out of love for their own? But no, they won't do it for love for their own. They left that festival unattended for 3 hours. They didn't send any military there for 3 hours. It was 1 hour drive away from Tel Aviv. That goes to show you how much the Israelis care about their people. So anyway, this was Saturday. This was the initial news. And there was fighting going on, and we saw they're targeting rockets at, I believe it's Ashkelon, which is the first city north of Gaza, and also Ashdod, which is the second city north of Gaza, quite close to Tel Aviv. They were sending rockets to Tel Aviv as well. They were physically attacking, I think, Sderot, which is a town just in the northern corner of Gaza. So it was incredible. They were fighting in numerous locations, the Hamas who had crossed from Gaza. As well as this, the Hezbollah, I believe on the second day, on Sunday, had started firing some rounds at Israel. And they started gearing up, and every day they've been sending rockets, and there's been reports of some skirmishes. There's been fake reports of them crossing that northern border. And nobody knows yet how involved are they, but they definitely are involved. And now it's been going on. So the first few days were very inspiring and all this. After, I think, Tuesday, guys, it's been quite, after Monday, really, it's been quite nail-biting and just quite caused me a lot of distress and distraught, because the language of genocide that Gantz, I forget their names, but Netanyahu and the Zionist leadership, the language of genocide they're using, they really mean it. Do you understand? They really mean it. And the state of the West is so, the media, the propaganda, the disunity in the Western publics is at such a state where the Israelis might actually get away with a genocide. Do you understand? I can't see in my country or in America the public outrage being strong enough to get the West to stop them. So what we've seen since Sunday, guys, is just this vicious carpet bombing of one of the most densely populated areas in the world. Of course, the Palestinian resistance must have planned for this a little. I think they would have hoped that their the hostages would give them more weight in negotiation. But that's not turned out to be the case. Israel has no human conscience. It does not care about those hostages. It wants land. More than anything, Zionists want land. And they want the land Muslim or even Christian free. And that's another point to note, guys, a lot of people forget here. There's quite a big Christian community in Palestine, but they're lumped in with the Muslims because Jews consider anybody non-Jew inferior. And just like in Syria, the Christians were forced to ally themselves to the person the West is attacking, Assad, because Assad was the only player in that war who didn't want to genocide the non-Sunni Muslims. So this is another case, guys, where the West abandons its Christians to proxies of other faith when it suits them. Which just goes to show you about Western values and what they really mean. So, Stefan, to finally get to your question, do I think the Palestinians have any chance? Let me ask you, Stefan, okay, if you're still there. Do you think there's any chance another player will help Palestine? So I think it was Tuesday or Monday, Hamas put out a call to all the regional allies saying this is the action, this is the Al-Aqsa flood operation. You've all seen how they desecrate our holy temple. Muslims, allies all over the world, I'm asking for your help. This Friday is the day, join or not. So that is tomorrow, guys. So I got an Instagram post, I believe, I'll get it first now. I'm just gonna get an Instagram post up which collected the statements of the different leaders of the region. So to answer your question specifically, Stefan, I believe that the way this war is playing out at the moment looks very bad for Palestine. Hamas and some of the other Palestinian resistance groups on their own, while they're cut off in the Gaza Strip, up against a Western army armed to the teeth with all the resources of the Western world, it looks very bad, especially if Hezbollah is only half committing. But if Hezbollah fully commits, apparently they have something like 80,000 rockets and like an insane drone arsenal as well. They're really well armed, Hezbollah. If they go all in with Hamas and with the Palestinian resistance, then I think there is a chance. If Israel's forced onto a two-front war. But these are all just my guesses, Stefan. I have no idea. And following the Ukraine conflict, it taught me to be humble with my predictions because especially with war, there's such a human emotional factor that we never know really what will happen next. But this has already been a disaster for Israel. That Saturday and Sunday were the worst days in Israel's history by far. They've never lost over 1,000 casualties, anything near 1,000 casualties in the history of this conflict. And I guess even if they do get crushed, the Palestinians, by this, even if there is ethnic cleansing in Gaza, that generation will have kept the resistance alive. Similar to our 1916 in Ireland, small group of men declared revolution. They took main buildings in the capital city, Dublin. They were jeered by locals, not much people liked them, and they were shot out of the buildings by the British Empire and they were executed. And to anyone alive at then, it would look like a stupid, horrible failure. But actually the consequence was they inspired a whole nation of people. And 3 years later, a mass guerrilla war broke out and we ended up getting some semi-independence out of that. So I think, do the Palestinians have any chance of actual victory? Yes, if the allies come true. Do the Palestinians have any chance without the allies? Yes, they do, especially even if they just get some help from Hezbollah. By themselves, they still have a chance of winning a victory, unfortunately, for the next generation. By building up such a revolutionary legacy, such a legacy of resistance, that the next generation will not be able to look at itself without trying to add to the history, without trying to add to the struggle. That's what happened here, and that's what most likely will happen there as well. So from this post, guys, from anti_imperialist_agenda, a nice page I follow on Instagram, he just collected the statements from the different players to see if they're going to involve. So I'll read them out and we discuss them one by one. So the Houthis have said they will go to war if the US intervenes. Muhammad Ali al-Houthi, this is the leader of the Ansar Allah organization. We warn America that any intervention in Palestine will lead to regional war. I believe it, guys. The Ansar Allah are amazing people. Like what they've been doing in them mountains since 2014, the humiliation they've put on the corrupt Saudi regime is really impressive. But if you just look at it, Yemen, Saudi Arabia, Middle East, Iraq, Syria, Israel, Palestine, how can they logistically reach the battlefield? I don't know. Can they go up through the Red Sea there? I don't know. Do you understand? And also, guys, this is a entity, the Ansar Allah, that's been living, you know, with the full weight of the Western world against them. They've been living under Saudi bombs and Saudi warfare for a long time now. Do they have much real firepower, much arsenal that they can enter this conflict with? I'm not convinced. And how do they even access the conflict? I'm not convinced either. Of course, they would definitely be helpful in supplies or, you know, in logistics. Maybe they can do something like that through the seas. I don't know. But just they're very far away from the conflict. I don't see how they can get involved. So the Iranian Ministry of Foreign Affairs spokesman said, that was about the Houthis in Yemen. Moving on to Iran. This is from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs spokesman earlier on in the week. Any foolish action against Iran will be met with a destructive response. Accusations related to an Iranian role are politically motivated and aimed at justifying the failure of Israel's regime. Some of those who have been supporting the daily crimes of the Israeli regime are now trying to change the place of the oppressors and the oppressed in recent developments, without paying attention to the 75-year violation of the rights of the Palestinian people by an occupying regime. So these are very good points. They all make sense. I'm sure we all know them here. The key thing there is in the first sentence, any foolish action against Iran. That's not a promise that any action against Gaza, unfortunately. So Iran is another one that I would not be quick to criticize. Iran has done really well in that region. Their IRGC has done really well for the Palestinians. They have been the main supporter of Palestinian people in my lifetime, in the last 28 years. And that's been like, they're a Shia state and they're doing this for mostly Sunni people, and they're working with Sunni organizations in Hamas to do this. Iran is a proper, authentic, sovereign Muslim nation, supporters of Palestine, but they have to use their heads as well. Do you understand how many US military bases are in that region? Do you understand how superior is Western armaments to local production? You know, the Iranians have a great war production industry. You know, their Shahid drones have proved to be real game changers in Ukraine. But we're talking about the American empire here, guys. The country that spends 9 times more in its military budget than the next 8 countries combined or something like this. You know, insane, guys. The amount of wealth and power and military ability the West has built up since World War II to inflict misery on unfortunate peoples like in Palestine or in the Donbass. Let's get them more statements up. Sorry. So guys, sorry, just to wrap that up, Iran can't get involved. Iran's hands are full. Do you understand? And they've done really well just to stay alive and to build up a level of strength that deters direct US invasion. If they launch war on Israel now, do they have the infrastructure to survive the extreme destruction America will bring their way? I don't know. I'm not sure they do. So that's why ultimately, guys, this war might be left to the Palestinian Resistance and Hezbollah, because they have the advantages of being paramilitary structures, not being state structures. Because any state that goes in, Syria is another one. Syria had a lovely note for their Palestinian comrades earlier on the week. I think it's here, yeah. This was the note from the Syrian Arab Army to Palestine early on the week on October 9th. It said, "There is no room for two in that pure land. And if this were imposed, it would be an Israeli lying covered in blood and a resisting Palestinian standing tall. Our compass is Palestine." Syrian Arab Army, October 9th, 2023. So that's a strong statement in support of the Palestinians from Syria, the same as we got from Iran. But Syria is wrecked, guys. Syria is coming up to 12, 13 years mostly on its own against proxy war forces coming from all over the world, bankrolled by the Western Empire. We only saw that horrible attack in Homs by the terrorists on their military academy graduation ceremony. They killed women, children, scores of young graduates as well. Syria has not got a break. Today, only today, the Israelis bombed Aleppo and Damascus airports. They bombed the runways. They made those airports unworkable. Why did they do this? Probably to disrupt supply chains between Iran, Syria, Hezbollah, and Hamas. That's the way I see it. It goes down like this. But they still have land. There's still a land route, I believe. There's a land route to Hezbollah and to the resistance in northern Palestine. I don't see where the help is going to come from, where the military help can access Gaza. Do you understand? But I already underestimated the strength of the Gazans in their own flame of resistance. And I think, guys, we were all guessing over which foreign power organized this last Saturday, last Sunday. It turns out, guys, this is from the Palestinians themselves. And that's what I very quickly tried to describe earlier, the recent provocations of the new settlements, making Jerusalem their capital, and the provocations in Al-Aqsa Mosque, one of the holiest mosques for Muslims. They all added to this. Yeah. I'll read these more statements. Sorry, guys. It's very hard to, folk, when you have no script really, it's very hard to stay speaking on the same thing. So we've talked about Syria. We've talked about Iran. Okay. This is a statement from the Iraqi Kataib Saeed al-Shuhada Brigades. This is a Shia group linked to Hezbollah and Iran. So, guys, the Shias as a religion, if any Muslim viewers here can correct me, but the Shia religion, I understand, is like slightly more political. There's no separation of politics and religion in Shiism. Am I right to say that? Something like that. So Hezbollah, even though they're a South Lebanon organization, they completely follow the orders of the Iranian supreme leader, Khomeini. Do you understand? Because he's seen as the supreme leader of the Shia movement, of the Shia religious/political movement. So they all come underneath this. So this Iraqi Kataib Saeed al-Shuhada Brigade would fall under that. They all operate as one entity. They're in different locations, but they've one Shia Islamic pro-sovereign anti-Western ideology. So they operate as one. So they released a statement this week saying, if the US decides to directly intervene in the Gaza conflict, US bases and troops in the region will become legitimate targets for the axis of resistance. So the axis of resistance includes includes Iran, it includes Syria, the Houthis, and obviously I'm learning now the Shia militias in Iraq. So these guys have weapons and they can access those weapons from Iran. It's on their border there. They access them easily. So that is probably a credible threat because it is a militia and they can do this without giving the Americans full reason to flatten Iraq. So your guess is as good as mine, guys, but I hope that this Iraqi Shia militia, Kataib Saeed al-Shuhada Brigade, follows through. So I guess they're threatening rather than promising. They're saying if Israel goes into Gaza Strip, they'll start bombing. No, they're saying if the US intervenes. That's right, I'm getting confused now. This Iraqi Shia militia are saying if the US intervenes, then they'll come to the conflict on the side of Palestine and they'll hit US targets in the Middle East. Okay? I don't think it's in this post. Here's another one from the Secretary General of the Badr Organization of Iraq, Hadi al-Amiri. If Washington intervenes in the battle between the Israeli regime and the Palestine, we will target all American assets in Iraq. So that's another militia in Iraq promising to get in only when America intervenes. I know I saw today, guys, I can't find any more statements from regional allies. I saw a very interesting statement from Pakistan, from their military recently. Not if America intervenes, but it said, if Israel goes into Gaza, we will provide them with ballistic rockets. Sounds great. Sounds great. But how the hell do you get to Gaza from Pakistan? Do you understand? When the Israelis are bombing the Rafah border crossing. And that's just another interesting aspect. So Egypt is not a very sovereign, revolutionary place at the moment. By all accounts, it's an economic disaster, social disaster too. So they're not going to invade or risk their bacon to save Palestine. But quite an interesting thing is happening with those aid convoys. So the last few days until today, Israel had been bombing the Rafah border crossing quite hard. Now, Israel has closed all the border crossings with Gaza. the only lifeline out is the Rafah border crossing, and even that is very heavily restricted, I think. But they bombed the Palestinian side of that over the last few days and told Egypt that any aid convoy will be bombed. And Egypt, yesterday, I believe, or the day before, released a statement back saying, we will send aid to Gaza anyway, and we are not entertaining the idea of taking 2 million Gazans and putting them in our regions and adding pressures on our society. But they said they're going to send aid anyway. And I was waiting to hear an update on this. I thought last night there might have been a showdown between the aid convoy and the Israeli army. But then, interestingly, the last update I saw from Egypt today was that their leader announced they're going to gather this aid convoy into an international convoy. They're going to get medics, nurses, food donations from international friends of Palestine, and they're all going to go together. And the Egyptian statement was, if the Israelis want to bomb that with the whole world watching, let them do it. And the interesting analysis I saw on Telegram from Mediterranean Man was that this was quite clever. If Egypt went in an aid convoy just as Egyptians, and if Israel takes all these out, these Egyptian aid convoy workers, would the West care? Does the West care about any brown lives in this world? How many times do we need to realize any non-Anglo lives in this world? Do you understand? Their idea of the supreme race is at the very basis of their ideology, of their world outlook. So if Israel bombed an Egyptian aid convoy, the Western world probably wouldn't think twice. The Arabs started it, they'd say. Do you understand? Just like 9/11 happens, they blame Muslims, so they terrorize two countries. You understand? The Western world's so lazy, they can get away with this shit, the elites. But cleverly, if there's an international convoy going, what might happen is that Israel will not risk that negative international attention of killing maybe Western charity workers as well. And interestingly enough today, Israel seemed to stop bombing that Rafah border crossing and Egypt reopened it. So that's the first sign of some slight de-escalation we've gotten. But please God, that aid convoy gets through. And please God, one of the allies joins the fight tomorrow and that they fight well, because this is heading towards genocide. I think the last figure I saw today was 1,300 have been killed in the carpet bombing already. Just been statements. We've all seen that statement I shared on Instagram of we are fighting human animals. Just been statements from the Israelis saying we aren't going to leave any buildings in Gaza. It'll be a tent city. This is the genocide of our times. And it's horrible, and it's been coming for a long time. But power to the Palestinians. Resistance is always the correct thing. If they don't have ultimate, immediate success in this round, they will have laid the foundation for the next generation. No matter what happens, Israel's going to lose in the long term. Why? Because there's 7 million Jews there, ultimately surrounded by 1.5 billion Muslims. Do you understand? And the geopolitical situation right now might be very much in their favor. America, the only true superpower, the only true active superpower in the region, their main backer, etc., etc. But America is getting weaker, and the American world is coming to an end. Do you know? And this is the whole excitement in the world today, is that the multipolar world is emerging. And what the multipolar world will look like, it will look like Africa for the Africans, Russia and the Russian world for the Russians, and it'll look like the Muslim world for the Muslims, because the Americans are going to have to leave. America 50 years from now will be such an unstable shithole that will have international peacekeeping organizations in fucking Portland, keeping the fascists and the fucking Antifa away from each other. That's the way America's going. America's going to leave every region on this earth. What's going to happen to Israel when they're on their own? Do you know what I mean? They're going to be finished. And the Muslim world will never forget Israel broke the Oslo Accords, denied Palestine any chance for statehood, denied them any humanity, treated them like animals, tried to starve them out over 20 years in Gaza. The Muslim world won't forget this. And America will leave the region inevitably. Do you understand? So I always knew that day was coming, but I underestimated the will and the drive for the Palestinian resistance to make that day come even sooner. Do you understand? So from the river to the sea, someday Palestine will be free. If the region can get it together now, if they're strong enough, the Iraqi militias, Hezbollah together, with state support from Iran, Syria, Pakistan, whatever it takes, if the region can do it now, that's a beautiful thing. If they don't, and a genocide unfolds, this is the most tragic, most just anyone with a human face cannot be smile at a genocide happening, and a genocide at this scale and as violent as this. Like the scenes in Nagorno-Karabakh, I found very depressing, guys. 120,000 people forced to leave their ancestral homeland. The Western world doesn't react. But this is more violent, guys. These 2 million people are being killed out of where they live. So yeah, if the genocide does unfold, it's going to be one of the saddest, most darkest moments in modern human history. But the Palestinians will come back. Do you understand? They'll still be in the West Bank, but they have to go to Egypt or whatever. They'll come back. The historical memory will live on, and the resistance will live on, and the resistance will have been replenished with the memory of endless martyrs who got amazing successes, unprecedented successes. So this is a bit of a ramble, guys. Thanks for anyone that watched. I'm just going to flick. Do we have any questions? No, we don't. I just want to tie up, what can we do as Westerners watching? Okay. What can we do? We feel helpless. We want to do something. We can contact local organizations, investigate them first. Do we know anybody in our country that can access Gaza, that can get stuff into Gaza? We can find Palestinian journalists. I'll share one today. I shared one yesterday. I'll share him again today. This incredible man, I think he's got nearly 500,000 followers, who's in Gaza. I'll get his name after this. We can find the people, guys, showing it on the ground, and we can share that to the world, whatever platforms we have. Do you understand? If the worst comes to worst, and one of the worst pages in history, human history, ends up getting wrote, you know, if we live to see the day, guys, when we all have grandchildren and whatnot, they'll ask you, what did you do? We want to say we did everything we could wherever we were, whether it's Ireland or America or wherever the hell we are, guys. So support local pro-Palestinian organizations, promote Palestinian journalism, promote anyone showing the facts on the ground. Do you understand? Do your best to refute the hysteria. Do you understand? The 40 beheaded babies, Biden's already retracted that. The festival massacre turned out not to be so much a massacre. It's always the same thing, atrocity propaganda. Do you understand? The imperialist elites trying to manipulate your emotions for their end game plan, which was already thought out before. And the end game plan here is Israel to destroy Arab unity, to destroy Muslim unity, and for Israel to do that through genocide by genocide. Do you understand? They've already ethnic cleansed so much of that country, and they want to continue to do it. So what can we do? We can give support to pro-Palestinian organizations. We can support Palestinian journalism, and just make it known, guys. And I think protests are good too. I went to one yesterday in Dublin, and protests are good because I think protesting can be quite futile in most issues in the West, but on this, it at least gives the government a sense of the voters they're losing. Do you understand? If 500,000 people turn up, do you understand, to a pro-Israeli government in a country that's got a pro-Israeli government, at least the government will calculate then, okay, if I go too hard Israel, I will lose these voters. And unfortunately, that's all we are to them, political calculations. Do you understand? And the whole Western world is back in Israel right now. But anyway, I'll end this now, guys, without going on and on. Thank you to anyone that watched and asked questions. I'll end this with just, I am a guy from Ireland. I've got political plans, media plans that I'll get back to after this blows over. This isn't about that. I just wanted to speak to the people that I speak to, give my opinion on this. I'll watch this back and see what I can do better the next time. But heart with Palestine, it has been since Saturday. The resistor is never, ever, ever in the wrong, and resistance is always worth it. Even if there's a horrible scenes, we see more horrible scenes, the spirit of resistance will live on in the next generation. And the ultimate victory of the Palestinian people in that region is not just probable, it is inevitable. Do you understand? Because America is leaving someday soon. And America, even as it's there now, is not what it was 20 years ago. America is getting weaker every day. We saw Iran bombing American bases after the Trump's assassination of their general last year. In 2019, I believe. It's an unprecedented world. Every day America gets weaker. Every day the liberation of that region gets closer. And the resolution of all these horrible injustices of the colonial/imperialist period, they're all going to get resolved. So Stefan, I don't know if you're here. But the sooner Palestine gets rid of Israel, the sooner Serbia gets Kosovo back, the sooner Russia gets Donbass back, the sooner Ireland gets its north back, the sooner China gets its Taiwan back. These are all connected, guys. It's all one global struggle, and all these injustices were all there for reasons. They were all there to destroy regions. Do you understand? Taiwan was there to not let the Chinese get too big. Northern Ireland there was to subjugate the Irish nation. Israel's there to subjugate the Arab nation. And it's one interconnected conflict, guys. And the last point I just want to make, actually, is just about China and Russia. So, like, follow a lot of Palestinian Arab media, and some of them are saying that, you know, why can't China and Russia just come all in? What are they doing? Well, guys, I wouldn't be quick to criticize them. I think they've used the opportunity very well to call for the creation of a Palestinian state. Both of them have been very clear and repetitive in saying that this is the time. No lasting peace will work until there is a Palestinian state. And I think that's been quite honorable diplomacy. What else can they do, guys? Do you understand? Russia is at full military capacity. China does not want conflict yet. We all found that out in August 2022 when they let Pelosi illegally visit Taiwan. They're not ready for full-on civilizational conflict with the West right now. So unfortunately, guys, this is a Western-dominated world. Do you understand? And words is unfortunately all Beijing and Moscow can give to Palestine at the moment. But let's hope that the Palestinian resistance has the strength and the military skill to get victory themselves. Let's hope that the regional militias are fearless enough to attack with all they have. And let's hope that Israel is defeated, because Israel is not a normal country. It was created on the basis of genocide, to promote genocide for the reasons of imperialist control of that region, Western imperialism's control of that region. I'll end it there, guys, before I go on and on, okay? Have a good night, everybody. Thank you for watching, and be well, okay? Thank you.